is us dancing. Okay. Um, Hi everyone. Welcome to another episode of How Did We Not Know That? I'm one of your hosts. My name is Jack.
And I'm Nat. And yeah.
Yeah, and that's us. Okay. So today Nat will be presenting on a topic that she chose. Go ahead, Nat.
Yeah, so today I'm going to be talking about the Mexican-American War. Yeah, do you know much about that?
I know nothing. I'm guessing that William McKinley, is this the one he led us through, or was that the Spanish-American War?
The Spanish-American War. So
Okay, so different things.
yeah, so these are two different things. Yeah, this war was actually led by President James K. Polk. Yeah, I did not know much about him as a president. So
Never heard of him, yeah.
yeah, I was like, okay. Yeah, I feel like I learned about the Mexican American War maybe in high school briefly. But like we didn't talk a lot about it. Also my dad is from Mexico, so like we'll talk about it once in a while, but like I really didn't know the details of the war, so like I had heard about it and I was like, oh, let me look into it a little bit more. Because it was recently Cinco de Mayo. I was thinking about past U.S. Mexico relations. So yeah, so
As you do on Cinco de Mayo.
that's how you celebrate Cinco de Mayo. But yeah, so I decided to look into this war a little bit more. So yeah, so like I said earlier, it was led by President James K. Polk. He was considered actually one of the last strong presidents until the Civil War. So he was
Okay.
he was a really strong leader. Whether or not you agree with like his actions, that's
Can
debatable.
I ask when he was president? So he would have been before Abraham Lincoln. So like way back.
Yeah, so he was actually elected in 1844, and he only served one term from 1845 to 1849. So this is a while back, and he was a Democrat, and his whole deal was that he was a huge supporter of Manifest Destiny, and he wanted to expand U.S. territory like all across North America. Basically, he wanted to take over as much land as possible. So like his whole campaign was that the Oregon territory should be occupied, and then Texas should be re-annexed. So we're gonna get into Texas a little bit later.
Right. Wait, annex is like we removed them. Like they're not part of us?
The annex is basically like you take an independent nation and then you make it a part of your nation. So
Okay, so we wanted to take Texas.
yeah,
Okay.
because this is the part I did not know about. At the time, Texas was a country. It was called the Republic of Texas. For
I
like,
believe that. Literally, if you meet anyone from Texas, they act like it's a country still. So
I was like doing my research on the Republic of Texas, and there's a lot of very like patriotic websites dedicated to the whole country. But yeah, for 9 years it was an independent nation, which I
yeah.
really did not know.
They're like most likely to split from the rest of the United States.
It's likely to yeah. So the whole time, like James Polk really wanted to annex the Republic of Texas. And additionally, on top of all of this, he also settled a border dispute with Britain. And he gained control of Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and then parts of Montana and Wyoming. So this is like,
It's a lot, yeah.
if you look at a map of the U.S., like before President Polk and then after President Polk, it's like insane. And so during his campaign, he also said he wanted to acquire the southwest part of what is now today the U.S., but he wanted to control all those states by buying it. But Mexico kept saying like, no, we don't want to sell it.
Oh, so before then, that Southwest was all territory of Mexico?
Like California, New Mexico, Nevada.
Oh, California was even Mexico's. Okay. What about like in the northeast, no, not northeast, the northwest area? So like Oregon and Washington, was that whose was that?
Yeah, I believe that was like British control because that's when he
Ah,
comes in and like settles that border dispute. But also like we have to remember like before that it was like Native American land,
right,
like first and foremost. But
right.
so yeah, let me jump to the Republic of Texas because this is what really made me interested in the whole topic. So after Mexico gains independence from Spain, so side note, if you didn't know, Mexico was a Spanish colony. So then Mexico gains its independence, and they allow U.S. settlers to start living in Texas, in the state of Texas. And once this happens, like the population of Texas booms, but this like really reduces the amount of Mexicans living in Texas. So now it's like mostly US settlers rather than actual Mexicans living in Texas. And so because of this, US settlers like revolt against Mexico, and they claim independence from the country of Mexico in 1836. And so there's the whole Texas Revolution. That's where, I don't know if you've heard of like the Battle of the Alamo. I feel like that's
I have. Yeah, I know nothing about it.
I always hear like remember the Alamo, but that's
Yeah.
when they like were fighting against Mexico.
Okay.
So at first,
When US settlers were fighting against Mexico.
so it's U.S. settlers versus like Mexican soldiers, and then
Oh.
settlers win.
Okay, so that's why they say remember the Alamo. I got to look into that.
I
I
don't
don't know.
know of like the Battle of the Alamo, but it was one of the battles within the Texas Revolution.
Yeah, I wonder why they don't want to forget that. Remember the Alamo.
I didn't look in. To be honest, like battles are not like my strong suit. They're not what I'm most interested in. So as we'll as we'll see
That's fair. Yeah.
through the battles, but
Yeah. It's like a rabbit hole too. I feel like when you look at one battle, it'll connect to like multiple other ones and then you just can't get out.
right, for
Mhm.
sure. Yeah, so Texas gains independence, and at first, the U.S. didn't want to incorporate it into the Union because the northern states didn't want another new slave state. So at the time, there was like a pretty good balance between like slave states and non-slave states. So they were like, "Oh, we don't need another slave state, so please don't join us." Um, Initially, it was a pretty risky move because the Mexican government was also encouraging border raids, and they warned that like if the U.S. tried to annex Texas, it would lead to war. And so, yeah, it was a pretty risky move. And if you're wondering like what the Republic of Texas was like as a country, for the most part, they really had no money, like credit or governmental structures. It was really hard to establish a strong government because they were constantly fighting against um, like Mexican soldiers and then also Native American tribes. And yeah, so it was not really it was a independent nation, but yeah, it was not a very strong nation.
Mhm.
So in 1844, the president before President James Polk, who his name is President John Tyler, also don't know much about him. He, right before he leaves office, he proposes a treaty of annexation to the Republic of Texas. So he also really wants to annex Texas. And this treaty is defeated in the Senate, again, because it would upset the slave state, free state balance. And then it
Uh-huh.
also risk a war with Mexico. So they were like, no, no, thank you. However, like pretty much like right before he like a couple months before he leaves office, he actually does President Tyler manages to get a congressional resolution passed, and this resolution is signed into law on March 1st, 1845. And so then President John Tyler leaves office, President James Polk assumes office, and Texas is officially admitted to the Union on December 29th, 1845. So the same
Okay.
President Polk assumes office. Texas is
Okay. And the Union is like the northern states, right?
the Union is like all the states. It's like the Union is
Oh,
the US.
okay. It just means the US then.
But yeah, and then
Is it like a non-slave state?
the Civil War, then you have like Union states versus like Confederate states. But
Okay.
time, it's like the Union is like
It's just everything. Okay. What side was Texas on for the Civil War? Do you remember?
they're Confederate. They're like
Oh,
in the South, and they were also slave states. So
okay. Shame.
yeah, so this is like yeah, again, just a reminder, like this is all right before the Civil War.
Mm.
Like gives you a better understanding. So even though like Mexico was like, hey, if you guys annex Texas, we're gonna go to war with you. They actually don't end up declaring war. However, like tensions start rising because there's huge border disputes. Like even though the U.S. annexed Texas, like Texas is a huge state, and so even within that state, there were border disputes over like where the where the two countries split off. So basically, Mexico claims that this Nueces River is the border, but the U.S. wants the Rio Grande to be the border. And so, like, they're fighting and arguing, and within that border, like, there's a lot of like small little skirmishes, I guess you would call them, like not official battles.
A skirmish.
Like
It was like actual term, skirmish.
I think that is a term, but
They had like a scuffle or something. Yeah.
yeah,
I don't know. Yeah.
but
Scrimmage. Scrimmage is like sports. When it's like not a real game, it's a scrimmage.
yeah, okay, maybe that's what I'm thinking of. Either way, they're like minor little stuff.
Mhm.
Civil War yet. However, so July 1845, so Polk, and so this is before like Texas is officially declared a state, right? But this is kind of like after resolutions have been passed, so they're like, okay, it's pretty much going to be official. So President Polk sends U.S. troops to this like disputed land that's between the Nueces and the Rio Grande. And then in November 1845, President Polk sends a diplomat named Don Slidell to Mexico in order to seek like boundary adjustments. Um, However, and they also want to like buy California and New Mexico, but this doesn't work out. And Mexico kind of shoots them down. They're like, no, like we're good. We just want to keep all of our land. Like, please leave us alone. And so and but like President Polk is very determined to acquire all this land, so he sends General Zachary Taylor to the mouth of the Rio Grande. So this is kind of like, okay, this is official, and we're taking this over basically. So on April 25th, 1846, the next year basically, Mexican cavalry attacks a group of U.S. soldiers in this disputed zones between the two rivers. And these U.S. troops are under the command of General Zachary Taylor. And so about a dozen Americans are killed, and additionally, Mexican troops laid siege to an American fort along the Rio Grande. And so they kind of like won this little battle. And then like after this, so after they're like winning, General Taylor calls in for reinforcement, and this reinforcement is like they have a lot of better weapons and artillery. So like basically after that, there's like a lot more battles, but basically like once we call reinforcement and we get congressional support, we're able to like attack all of the Mexican troops that are being sent, and yeah, and then we basically win like everything after this. Yeah, so because we kind of lost this little upset, President Polk was like really really pissed, and he goes to Congress and he's like, hey, like we really need to declare war because like so far you guys have been kind of lenient. I know you don't want to upset like the balance between the states, but like they're attacking us, so we have to go to war. So on May 13th, Congress declares war. And again, there's opposition from all the northern states. They're like, please don't do this. And additionally, throughout this whole Mexican American War, there's actually no official declaration of war from Mexico. So this is just kind of like on the American side. So I think that's important to keep in mind. So after this all happens, the Mexican American War goes into full fledged. So just to give you a little like overview of the war as a whole, so it lasts from 1846 to 1848. It's a little under 2 years. This is actually the first U.S. armed conflict fought mainly on foreign soil. So I thought that was super interesting.
Yeah, maybe that's why we don't hear about it so much because it wasn't on US soil.
Yeah, it was fought mostly on Mexican territory, and I mean the whole purpose was like for territorial acquisition, and like so it's yeah, maybe that's why we
Mhm.
also don't really talk about it as much. But there's a lot of like high morale on the US side because at this time we have a really strong navy, our government leadership is super strong as well, and then our economy is doing a lot better than Mexico. So everyone's pretty confident. that we're going to win this. And additionally, at this point, there's only around 75,000 Mexicans that are currently living north of the Rio Grande. So because of this, it's like really easy to conquer these lands. So
Hmm. Wait, before you go on, where is the Rio Grande? Like,
that's actually, well, like spoiler alert, that's a current like border, like
ah,
a natural border between the US and Mexico.
Mexico. Oh, I see. Okay.
Texas today, I guess. Um,
Huh.
so yeah, it's a really big river. And yeah, spoiler alert, that's the current border today. So I guess we know how this ends, but
Yeah. You're like saving it for later. It's why you didn't tell me.
it's fine. I feel like, yeah, people probably know, but I
Yeah.
but yeah, so I guess there's a lot of battles. There's I can list them off. There's the Battle of Buena Vista in February 1847. There's the Battle of Veracruz, the Battle of Mexico City, and again, I kind of like I'm just listing these off. I don't mean to like diminish I guess the importance of these battles and like make light of it. I just am not. I don't think I'm personally qualified to like talk.
Right.
Yeah, these battles I don't really have a strong knowledge of like military and like artillery like during this period. So
Yeah.
if you would like to learn more, please go ahead and look. History.com has some amazing art about these battles. But so now I'm gonna jump to like Mexico's perspective. So Mexico is like not doing great. They've lost pretty much every battle, and it doesn't look like they're gonna win. And so they in like in active desperation they turn to General Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna. And so let me tell you a little bit about this guy. He's got kind of a wild record. So he's this very charismatic leader, uh, who was actually kind of a former dictator in Mexico. And he, at this point in time, he was currently living in exile in Cuba. So he had like been arrested in Mexico, and they're like, "Get out! Like we don't want you anymore. You're too much for us." And so
Yeah.
in Cuba, which was a Spanish colony at the time. However, so General Santa Anna like so there Mexico is like, you're a really good military leader, so like we kind of need you right now. And Santana's like, okay, I'll be there, but I can't really like get there because like there's so many US naval blockades blocking my path, like I can't get
Uh-huh.
to Mexico from Cuba. And so what he does is so General Santana like talks to, well, I guess communicates somehow through mail, with President
Carrier pigeons or something.
Carrier Pigeons. So somehow he gets in touch with President Polk, and he's like, "Hey, like if you allow me to return to Mexico and pass through all your naval blockades, I'm gonna end this war in terms favorable to the U.S." So he's like, "I'm gonna help out the U.S." And he's like, "Don't worry, like Mexico wants me back, but I'm not gonna let them like win." And so President Polk is like, "Okay, cool, like thanks. You can go ahead." Like, so General Santana, he makes it to Mexico, and then he immediately double crosses President Polk by taking control of the Mexican army and then leading it to battle and like strengthening the Mexican army. He's like, "I played you." So
I'm honestly not surprised. I don't know how
right.
President Polk was like, yeah, that sounds cool.
His defense, like this general had been exiled from Mexico, and they like kind of all hated him, and they're like, "Please,
Okay. So he made the case like, I don't even like Mexico. I'm going to help you guys.
like we're not on the same side." So, but
Oh, okay.
so because of General Santa Anna, the war lasts for almost 2 years. So if
Uh,
come in, it probably would have lasted a lot shorter because the U.S. was like doing so well before he came.
mhm.
So yeah, because of his arrival and then his kind of like reshaping of the whole army, yeah, it lasts for like a lot longer than the US had expected. They kind of thought it was going to be like really quick, over and done, but it kind of dragged on a lot longer than they had expected. And so yeah, there's so many battles. One battle that I did want to go into a little bit more detail about was called the Bear Flag Revolt, which is which was from June to July in 1846. And so remember how I said earlier, California used to be part of Mexico. That's why like in California there's so many like city names and places that are like in Spanish. It's because
Uh,
and so again in California there are a lot of US settlers, not as many as there were in Texas, but there's still like a good amount of US settlers in California. And so there's a small group of these settlers that actually rebelled against the Mexican government, and then they proclaimed the state of California as an independent republic. And so
oh.
they called it like the Bear Flag State, and they had a whole bear flag. That
Oh, okay. Is that the one that we still have today?
that's the one we still have today.
Okay.
Yeah. So I also
That makes sense too. I would say Texas is the first state that I would be like, yeah, they're definitely going to be their own country. And then California is a close second.
hmm yeah. I was like, okay, this makes a lot more sense. Like everything is clicking into place.
Yeah.
Like, however, so the Republic of Texas lasted for about 9 years, but the Bear Flag State only lasted about like 3 weeks because like
That's so embarrassing.
it's pretty rough. So like basically like they rebelled against the Mexican government, they raised their flag, and then like about 3 weeks later, like the US military starts occupying California. They were like, "Oh, we didn't realize you're like this whole war is happening and you're like trying to claim all this territory." So yeah, so California actually joins the Union in the year 1850. And yeah, the bear flag became the official state flag in 1911. So fun fact.
Damn. Wow.
So after all these battles, General Santa Anna in Mexico, he's not getting a lot of support because even though like he did help strengthen the Mexican army, like there's only so much you could do, or he could do because the U.S. just had a lot better, I guess, artillery and like weapons, and yeah, they had more funding, and so General Santa Anna quickly loses public support, and so he resigns slash is pretty much overthrown. It's still kind of like, yeah, they pretty much kick him out, and he's exiled again. And he lives all over the world in exile. It's crazy. You people should look into his bio because he
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 lived a wild life.
really did. He lived everywhere. And so after this, so the U.S. has won all these battles, and at this point in time, they're pretty much just waiting for a new government that's capable of negotiations, like to form into place. So they pretty much won. So forward, fast forward. Why do I? Okay, fast forward to February 2nd, 1848. The Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo is signed, and so this treaty between the U.S. and Mexico establishes the Rio Grande as the U.S.-Mexican border, which is the border that still exists today. And then Mexico officially recognizes U.S. annexation of Texas and is like, okay, you guys can keep it. And then Mexico additionally agrees to sell California and the rest of its territory north of the Rio Grande for $15 million, plus assumption of certain damages claims. And so,
Ooh, how much is that in today's money?
yeah, I was gonna.
That's a lot.
It's
15 million in like the 1800s?
but yeah, I can't imagine like
That's gotta be like
a lot.
triple digit billion, maybe?
Yeah. Um. So I can't really find. I keep finding conflicting numbers, but basically it was a lot of money. Um.
Yeah. Good for Mexico. Make them pay.
Yeah,
Sounds like they got bullied.
right. And I was like actually kind of surprised that like they still paid Mexico for the territory. I was like, I kind of assumed the worst, and they were just gonna be like, well, you lost, so it's
They're just like, nah, it's ours now.
yeah.
Yeah.
But this treaty actually added an additional 525,000 square miles to the US. So it's crazy.
Whoa.
So okay, the aftermath of the war, is insane because Mexico loses about a third of its territory. So the US gains California, Arizona, New Mexico, and then parts of Utah, Nevada, Wyoming, and Colorado. So again, if you look at a map before and after the Mexican-American War, it's crazy how much land was acquired. And so even though President Polk had won the war, he actually lost public support because the war had lasted about like 2 years and it was really bloody and like it cost the US a lot of money. And they were kind of like, oh, we thought this was going to be like less than a year, but it kind of dragged out. And so, yeah, people are upset with him. And additionally, this war reignited the slavery debate. And it ultimately results in the Civil War in the 1860s. So this was like a precursor to the Civil War because people started like, I guess, yeah, reigniting this debate because all these states, a lot of them are going to end up as, people are arguing, are they going to be like slave states? Are they going to be free states? And the whole debate ensues. And so
Yeah.
Polk, he's not doing well in the polls. He doesn't seek re-election. And he actually, so President Polk actually passes away in June 1849, pretty much right after he leaves office. And he's 53 at the time. And so in the next election, so if you're wondering who becomes president after James Polk, so remember General Zachary Taylor from earlier. So he was the one who like led all the U.S. troops to fight against Mexico, and because of this, he became like a national hero. So he actually wins the next election. However, so President Zachary Taylor is in office. However, he actually becomes severely ill and he passes away 16 months after his inauguration.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I was gonna say I've never heard of Zachary Taylor.
Because he passed away like really quickly after he assumed office. And so his
Oh,
president is Millard Fillmore, and he assumes office after that. So that's kind
wow. Also never heard of
of
President Millard Fillmore. Yikes.
yeah, yikes.
I just automatically assumed, I was like, okay, this was before the Civil War, so like Abraham Lincoln's next, right?
We're like, when is Lincoln get here? Every episode.
Yeah.
It's just
Our favorite Prezi.
yeah, so that's pretty much the Mexican-American War. One quick thing I did want to talk about. So it was recently Cinco de Mayo, and so there's a lot of like misconception about what like Cinco de Mayo actually celebrates. So I wanted to ask you if you know like what the celebration behind Cinco de Mayo is, like why it's a holiday.
Yeah.
You
I
know?
hope I get this right because, you know, my best family friends are Mexican American. So I'm pretty sure Cinco de Mayo is when the Mexican army had to, okay, this is probably completely wrong,
Oh,
but
no.
I thought the French army was trying to take over Mexico, and the Mexicans had like maybe like a fifth of the size of like the French army and like way less resources, but they somehow won and like were able to still
Yeah,
like keep Mexico.
yeah, no, you're like completely 100% correct. Yeah,
Yes. Okay, cool.
because a lot of people think it's like, oh, Mexico's Independence Day, but it's a holiday that celebrates, yeah, the day that they won this battle against the French army in the Franco-Mexican War. So
Nice.
like Mexico ends up losing this war, but this battle was like really significant because like the odds were not in their favor, but they still won. So
Definitely. Yeah, no, okay. I'm so glad I got that right. Shout out to the Riveras. I love you guys.
yay, we love it. So yeah,
Nice.
that's the Mexican
Okay.
War.
Nice. Thank you for sharing today. I think even though President Polk lost the favor, it in turn is like good because it sparks the slavery debate, which was necessary for moving forward.
100%. And yeah, again, like these maps, like before and after the war of like how much the US grows is crazy. And yeah, I didn't realize, like I knew we had that Mexico like lost a lot of its territory to the US, but yeah, you look at these maps and it's so crazy to think about. Mexico literally lost a third of its territory in this war, so
Yeah, they really sound like they got pushed around a bit. So Cinco de Mayo is a big deal that they were like, we're done with this. Did Cinco de Mayo happen after this? Mexican American War or before?
Yeah, it's after. So it's in 1862.
Nice. Nice.
So
Okay.
yeah, and actually, like Cinco de Mayo is not really celebrated as much in Mexico itself. Like my family that lives in Mexico, like they don't really celebrate it. I think in like Pueblo where the battle was fought, I think like the people living there celebrate it more. But it's really like it's almost an American holiday. Um,
Honestly, I feel like we just took it over so we could have coupons on like tacos or something that day.
exactly. Yeah.